In 1993, I think it was somewhere mid to late May. I only remember that because when I was talking with one of the host families, I remember saying that Becca was 8 months old. I was on a mission trip to the Yucatan Peninsula. And at that time of year, it is, well, most of the time it's always sweltering hot down there, but at that particular time of year, it was very warm. And I learned to appreciate the siesta, for one thing. But we took a little side trip to a cenote. Do you know what a cenote is? So these things are distinct to the Yucatan Peninsula, and what it is at one point in time, the limestone is dissolved in the groundwater, and it will collapse cave floors, and so they'll fill up with the water underneath, and people will go in there and go swimming because it's nice cold water. And so we were taken there to go for a swim. And families are there. It's like a picnic. It's like when we go to the lake, right? They go to these cenotes, which are, this one happened to be probably about 200 feet inside of a cave entrance, and there's no extra light except the light coming in. So it was both beautiful and frightening all at the same time. And so the rest of the group just gets ready, sees the kids playing in there, runs in there and dives in there. And I sit back and watch, because I am sure some Lovecraftian horror dwells in the depths of that cenote, and the moment that I jump in is going to be the time it gets hungry. And I will be its target. So I stayed there in the cool of the cave. That was nice. But I did not go into the cenote. I was just trying to be there where I was just drying off the sweat and safe from whatever was down at the bottom. Now, I tell you that story because we tell ourselves stories all the time. And some of them are true, and some of them we know aren't true, but sometimes the ones that we know aren't true still feel true. Like, was Cthulhu at the bottom of that cenote? No, absolutely not. But I told myself that story, felt true enough to me, and it dictated my choice. And I'll never probably be able to swim in a cenote ever again. Fear says, stay on the ledge where it's safe. And faith says, there's life in the water. Now, the thing about these tales that we tell ourselves is some of them stick with us, and we tell ourselves these stories over and over and over and over and over again. Even though they aren't necessarily true, we actually start to believe them as true. And today's text from Numbers is a great example. You have the spies who went off into the promised land to scout ahead. They were gone for 40 days, which is, of course, formulaic for the Bible. It means they were gone just long enough to get the information that they needed. They saw the same people. They saw the same grapes, which one bunch took 2 men to carry. But they told 2 very different stories. There was the fearful story that the land consumes those who dwell in it, that is a land of giants to whom we seem to appear as grasshoppers, that there's no way There's no way we can ever take this land. And then there's the faithful story, which says the Lord will bring us into this land and give it to us. And true to form, in case you ever feel judgmental about these folks who were wandering in the wilderness and all the times they did this, the fearful story won. And I have to wonder why. Why did the fearful story win? Was it peer pressure? Was it just the familiarity of fear? Was it the comfort of inaction? Something like that? I don't know. But in that story, fear says the land will consume us, and faith says the Lord will give it to us. I don't think we as human beings realize how important stories are to our existence, especially sacred stories. See, the spies didn't just bring back a scouting report, they brought back stories. And in faith, our stories aren't just decoration, they work to shape our reality. Stories do, if you look at the scholars and the research, you'll see stories, especially religious stories, do four basic things. They either present truth or they reinforce a truth that's already known. Not just facts, okay? But truth that forms people. The second thing they do is they reveal the relationship between the divine and the ordinary, showing us where God's work meets our everyday, and how sometimes. And now I'm going to give you two really big words that you can take with you this week and show off, okay? The first word is called etiology. And etiology means that these stories explain the origin of certain things, of places and how they got their names, rivers, landmarks, or people and how they got their name. Think of Jacob coming back and being renamed Israel. And the other service they provide or task that they do is they create anamnesis, which is remembering in such a way that the past becomes present where we are now, and then teaches us how to react and act in the present moment. It's one of those things that we always hope to achieve during communion, that we're having that moment where we're reliving the Last Supper and trying to bring that moment into our moment to edify and educate us. And I lied, I'm going to give you another big word. It's not really a big word, but it's a foreign word to you. And it's the word thetic. Okay, Thetic. And thetic language is language that declare what is real. Okay, beyond what our subjective experience is and even beyond what objective reality is. This thetic religious language says this is what reality actually is, the whole of it. It says that we're not just sharing opinions or even only reporting facts. We're naming a reality that's bigger than our own experiences or the world's cold statistics. And so the fearful thetic on that day from the story was the land consumes those who dwell in it, as if abundance itself was dangerous, as if blessing would destroy them. Meanwhile, the faithful Thetic language was that the Lord will bring us into this land and give it to us. Two different versions of reality, one aligned with God's history of rescue, and the other erased it. The door just closed. I was wondering if one of our ghosts was not happy with what I was saying. I don't know. And then after we get this story of the negative report, we get what almost becomes a refrain from the people throughout the whole wilderness episodes, right? And that is, we should have stayed in Egypt. In fact, let's go back to Egypt, because at least there, if we go into here, into this promised land, and we face these giants, our wives and our little ones will become plunder, which seems a bit ironic to me, because back in Egypt, the thing that started all of this was that Pharaoh killed the firstborn of all of the Israelites to try to control the population. And now, in their head, we should go back there because it's safer. Fear didn't just distort the present for them, it rewrote their past. You see how that can work? It turned a place of chains and slavery into a place of safety simply because it was familiar. Fear stories will do that. They can make us nostalgic for slavery. They can convince us that what's killing us is actually what's keeping us alive. And when told often enough, over and over again, they start to feel like truth. I mean, think about the irony in this one. Pharaoh targeted the same children that they thought would be protected by going back there. Fear rewrote their history so that slavery turned into safety because of familiarity, and fear stories always make us nostalgic for chains. Fear says it was better back in Egypt. Faith says God brought us out for a reason. Now, we're in our own kind of wilderness at the moment here, in this place. We have our own Egypt stories. Old programs, old ways, things that worked before but don't work now. All of these things are taking away from us. They steal from us, not just our history, but also our past and of our identity, of who we are. It's easy to cling to what's familiar. We even have a phrase for it. The devil we know. Even if clinging to the devil we know keeps us from stepping into whatever God has for us next. So, some things to think about, some questions for you as you go about this week. What are these Thetic religious stories that we're declaring about our future? And is it that abundance will consume us, or that God will bring us into what's next? If you look throughout scriptures, you'll see in various places, Old and New Testament, that these stories of fear do not have to bind us. In Psalm 27, David doesn't deny the danger that exists in the world, but he reframes it in the light of God's presence. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And then all the way in the New Testament, in 2 Timothy chapter 1, we have a very familiar phrase that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of self-discipline. Faith gives us tools for wise action, not reckless action. So faith is a kind of wise courage, not recklessness or abandon. Fear says we don't have enough. Faith says God's presence is enough. Listen for the fear stories you give yourself every day this coming week. Those that occur in your own mind or in church conversations. And then ask yourself, what would this story sound like if God's presence, power, and love were the main character? And it doesn't take a lot, just small steps. Reframing even one conversation can start all of these inherited patterns. In 1986, I joined a friend's youth group. I joined them for a day trip to Cedar Point. And I had never ridden a roller coaster before. And the first one that they all chose to go on was the biggest around at the moment, the Gemini. Yes, that's how old I am. And as we were progressing through the very long line, getting closer and closer to getting on that ride, the anxiety in me was steadily rising. Until, as we're getting very close, people looked at me and said, "Are you all right? You are very pale right now." And of course, you can't, when you're a teenager, you can't show weakness, right? So I just said, "Yeah, I'm just a little nervous. I'll be fine. Just a little nervous is my translation for terrified. And as we were going to be next to get on the ride, people literally looked at me and said, you know, you can just step through and wait for us. Nobody's going to say it. And I'm like, nope, I'm here now. And I got on that ride and I went up that first hill and I was clenching the bar as hard as I could, certain that it was not going to hold me in there. There's no way that bar could do that, right? And when we went down that first hill, I began a string of cussing, is all I can say. I think that throughout that first ride on the Gemini, I said every variation of a cuss word that I've ever heard in my Irish Catholic upbringing. I think that's all I did through that whole ride on a youth group tour, a church youth group tour. Needless to say, I survived, but I also discovered something. I love roller coasters. I love riding on roller coasters. I would never have discovered that if I'd have just given in to the fear and stepped through and waited for everybody else. Fear said, don't get on the ride. Faith said, hold on, this is going to be worth it. Fear tells a story. Faith tells a better one. Which one will we live by? Amen.